that frontline service position, well designed, well supported, so that excellent service is easy to do every day and consistently. That's good job design. If you talk to a call center representative who just seems to know the answers and knows how to resolve your issue sort of once and done, totally in a satisfactory way, that's good job design.
Welcome to Work Matters, where we explore what leaders can do to make work more productive, valuable, meaningful, and impactful. I am your host, Thomas Bertels. We have talked a lot about work design on this show, and today we're talking to somebody who has actually done it many times. Joe Spadaford is a senior executive in the financial services industry. He has extensive experience implementing work design in banking and insurance at Citibank, First Chicago, AXA, Computershare, and AST. In today's discussion, we explore what are the symptoms that suggest work needs to be redesigned, what does a typical implementation journey look like, what are the key success factors for implementing work design, and what are the results that can be attained through work design. I hope you will enjoy this conversation. Joe Spadaford, welcome to the Work Matters podcast.
Hi, Thomas. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You have a lot of experience in this topic of work design, right, which we have been covering here a lot. How did you first get introduced to this framework?
That's interesting. Many years ago at Citibank, they were encountering significant problems in their back office, their production operations, a lot of backlogs, quality challenges. It was a really tough environment for the bank at that time. And some innovative folks in operations got together with their chief executive and they said, look, we're going to look at the way we do production and we're going to introduce some new ideas. We're going to introduce a process to break up this monolithic production environment we have into discrete channels and have those channels aligned with customer segments. And then we're going to look at the people that service those customers in those channels, and we're going to redesign their jobs. We're going to allow them to do a transaction from beginning to end because we want to build accountability, and we're going to give them a little more authority than they have today to make some operating decisions, and we're going to call this the workstation professional role. So it was an interesting approach. Never had seen it before, and Citibank introduced it, and they aligned technology to support this new operating model. And it took some time and some technical challenges to overcome, but it became quite successful. And ultimately, the whole corporate bank at Citibank at the time relied on this sort of workstation approach to operations. And so I was very fascinated by it because for the first time, I could see the benefit of structural change in a job creating a very positive business outcome. So that was my first exposure to job design. I thought it quite effective.
What was your role back on that project?
It's interesting. I was an internal auditor at the time, and my assignment was to make sure that this new model that was being introduced in operations didn't create any undue risk. So I had to be a little bit nimble myself in working with management in this innovative space to see how we could agree on a control framework that would still achieve their objectives, but provide oversight, provide some barriers to fraud and other things that auditors care about, and to do it in a way that would be supportive of the change. And we achieved that after a few months, and I became even more convinced this was the right model for us. So I was shortly after that audit experience, I was given a line assignment, and I took away everything I had learned from this exposure to operations and the workstation role, and replicated those same things in my shop quite successfully.
Yeah, and you've been implementing, using work design, I think, in a number of right subsequent steps in your career, right? Maybe give us like one example of like a right a project where you actually were it's like in the leadership seat, right? And you made the decision, and what prompted you? What was the context, and what was the problem you were trying to address?
So the best example is probably the commercial lending space at First Chicago at the time. Um, we had a problem in terms of relationship management not being as effective at the time at First Chicago as other banks appeared to be based on benchmarking surveys we had seen. So the CEO actually made a decision because it seemed like the relationship managers were getting bogged down much more in administration and not spending enough time with their customers. So that was something that had to change. So the CEO made a decision to use the term offload the administrative tasks from the relationship management folks to support people. And then he set a new set of KPIs for relationship managers to drive better customer interaction and more business opportunity. I was responsible at the time for ensuring those support pieces came together logically, effectively, and we were able to execute, for the bank, for the relationship managers and our customers. So it was the execution of that set of job changes that really was my learning experience in implementing large scale change, affected over 600 people in support roles throughout the country. All were moved into really newly designed roles. So that was the beginning, and but the outcome was great. We'd seen a really good metrics on our internal tracking of quality, and we saw certainly an improvement in the relationship management's role, as evidenced by additional benchmarking studies.
You implement this in a couple of companies throughout your career. What would you think, right, are like the indicators, the signs that would tell you that maybe there's an opportunity, right, to improve whatever you're given through this approach?
Well, there were a lot of things that jump out at you. Certainly if there's not clarity about roles and responsibilities, especially across functions, because as you know, the execution for customers is frequently a cross-functional event. Many people are involved with the servicing aspects or the processing of a customer request. So how do you create teamwork alignment around that? And if it's not working, it's usually a sign that the job design problem exists. Other things, it would just be just performance, the inability to take on new business effectively, or feeling constrained by supporting a growth agenda in the business because of the way you're structured, the way you're set up. Um, it's the things that are limiting success. Often, job design issues are part of the equation. Not the whole thing. Could be systems problems, could be just process weaknesses. But ultimately, if people are in the mix, they have a job. Is their job contributing to the success of the company, or is it moving in a different direction? And that's what you have to ferret out. But I would just look for normal performance indicators and get underneath them with some probing questions, and you'll often find the signal of a job that needs to be changed.
This framework has been around for like a really long time, right? I mean, it goes back to like the 1970s. Um, what do you attribute, right, to what do you think is the root cause as to why not more companies have embraced this as a transformation methodology?
I don't know. They may not embrace it directly, but they do think about it indirectly when they're implementing new technology, when they're implementing a new product. So it is given some thought, but there are fundamental principles, that need to be followed in the design of a new job, and that isn't given a lot of thought typically. So what we have is people get a procedure to follow or a role to perform, but they may not get any feedback on how they're executing the role, or they may not have all the tools needed to execute the role. So what we find is the job is really not designed. There's a new function created, but whether or not that person's going to stay in the function for the long term or even perform it to some level of expectation is an open question. But if you design it, with the right feedback, the right level of autonomy, giving the person a sense of task significance, there's enough skill variety in the role. These are the elements that we talk about in job design, and those are often not addressed. So I think it's still an open opportunity for people to step in, for managers to step in and think about those things and make some adjustments in their roles and responsibilities of staff.
So, what needs to be in place for work design to be successful, right? What are the key ingredients that you need to have, right? Otherwise, it's not even worthwhile starting.
Well, you've got to have support from the top. It's real important to have an executive understanding of the importance of keeping a workforce well tuned, efficient, of course, but that people feel they're in a good job, they have a good job to do, and if you have that buy-in and executive leadership sees the outcomes of people in well-designed jobs, then I think that's very important. And without executive level support, you're not likely to make this happen. There also needs to be what I would call a general awareness that the current operating model is not terribly effective. That it needs to change. There's too much stress in the current environment. There are too many constraints. We're not doing what our customers need us to do fast enough, or our competitors, quite frankly, are beating us in a part of the market that we used to dominate. So it's those kinds of things that say, let's take a look at how we're using our people. In some cases, do we have the right people? But what is the role we're expecting our people to deliver for our customers? I always like to use the frontline service role as a critical role in anchoring the relationship that our external customers have with us, and in anchoring the internal relationships that need to occur to make sure we're executing properly for the customer. So if you can get that frontline service position well designed, well supported, so that excellent service is easy to do every day and consistently, that's good job design, and it shows. It really does show when if you talk to a call center representative who just seems to know the answers and knows how to resolve your issue sort of once and done, totally in a satisfactory way. That's good job design. And so I'd say if you start with your frontline people, look at how their work is designed. Are they executing well for customers? Or what's getting in the way, and then go from there. And it leads to the best refinements in job design that are necessary.
So, how does technology fit into the picture? Because, I mean, everybody's talking about AI, right? And I don't know, 5 years ago, we were talking about digitization, right? I mean, I think since the 1990s, right, I think there's been ever increasing reliance on technology to drive productivity gains. Sometimes people have a hard time seeing those gains. But certainly technology starts to stack up, right? And there's a lot of tech in the workplace. How does technology fit into the work design picture?
I view technology as a tool, and I view it also, the latest technology, as a partner. The bots are a partner. We can get tremendous assistance from AI, from robotics, for taking out routine tasks, repetitive tasks from the workday of many of our employees, and so that's a good thing. I think what it allows from a job design standpoint, it allows that individual to take on new roles or to expand their roles into a more creative space that has the customer in mind. So new ways to service the customer, new ways to provide answers to customer inquiries faster, to help them rethink their processes in working with us. So there's a lot of untouched ground that a service person, as an example, can invest his time in doing to make us better for our customers. The other thing is it allows that person to oversee the bots and what they're doing and increase their own productivity for getting the work through in a high quality fashion at a very rapid rate. So there's a lift in productivity in addition to the creative use of skills that they haven't had a chance to exercise.
I mean, part of this obviously changes, right, the jobs people have. And I can, right, that introduces like a new set of challenges, right? If you ask people now to do, right, a bigger job, right, a redesigned job, right, they might ask for more money, right? I mean, doesn't that like threaten kind of like the business case, the ROI, if you redesign work? What have you seen in that regard?
I haven't seen that concern so much as I've seen the issue of job security being front and center to the incumbents, folks in those roles that are affected by the technology. But what I also have seen is once they get used to the technology partnership and what it can do for them, they start getting very creative in how to use the tools and how to optimize it. So I see the threat diminishing fairly quickly after the technology's been introduced and really help solve a lot of thorny problems because the real culprit is time. People just don't have the time to do what they know they should do because of all the routine tasks and functions that just consume the day. So if you can get rid of a lot of that, you can start dealing with the higher order issues that everybody knows really need more attention. And so that's a plus. The threat, ultimately, maybe we don't need as many staff on the front line, but I'm seeing more a change in how we use staff as opposed to elimination of staff outright for the most successful AI programs. And I think that the future is yet to be written on is this all a good thing? Chat GPT, how does that get introduced? Again, same thing. It's going to allow people to do an awful lot more, to be a lot more individually effective with the tool than they were before. So I'm hopeful that it'll be a net positive as it's been, I think, so far.
Coming back to like the work design topic, right? I mean, as you implement that, so what are the major challenges? I mean, obviously that's a major change. What's difficult about it?
Well, it's almost always cross-functional. So you need executive level commitment to a program of change that will include job design and probably systems changes and perhaps some organizational changes. So it's a basket of change activity that has to happen. So somebody very senior with the authority has to say this will take place, and here is why. So you need that. You also need really good cooperation from your colleagues in other units, and so you need engagement, their engagement in the process as well, and getting staff engaged so they don't feel threatened by it. Because job design, we look at it as a positive. Everybody fears change. So the best thing to do to overcome the fear and the resistance is engagement, and so on every level. And the other thing is there is going to be some resource needed, some project resourcing. So that has to be agreed to up front. And this is not a quick fix. These projects typically take 18 months to 2 years to really run the full course, although you will start getting benefits very early in the game. But it takes time to settle in and to get the full benefit scope realized.
This is about like the people side of people process technology, right, to a significant degree. Um, what role does the HR function play in all of this?
Well, the HR function, they are focusing on jobs largely to establish pay grades and justify promotions and so forth, which are important elements of the equation. Job design can feed into that and maybe feed off of that a little bit. We can make those job descriptions a little more meaningful, perhaps. Certainly, we can make the objectives that the folks in those roles have set for themselves regarding job design goals and so forth. But HR should be a partner, and I think generally they feel good about this space, but it doesn't neatly fit into the way they do job descriptions. It's different. So I would just say creating a dialogue with them, making them aware of the change effort, and asking them to contribute in any ways they can. Because ultimately, if we do a fair amount of redesign at multiple positions, we are going to recast job descriptions, and we are going to want to give people a career path or a career ladder within multiple jobs that have been redesigned. And you have to do that in partnership with HR. So I don't see them leading the charge. I see them as a vital partner, and their importance grows as time goes on, and people are looking for career opportunities.
This is a journey, right? 18 to 24 months. Paint us a picture of kind of like what that journey looks like, right? I mean, if you like break it into phases, right? What's like the sequence of events along that journey?
Well, the general sequence for leading an effort like this and have led in the past, I always start with survey data. If we have customer survey data, internal survey data, we've done job diagnostic surveys of the current workforce so they can get a sense of how well designed their current jobs are. We've also gotten focus groups set up both internally and with customers. And again, it's listening. You don't want to dive into this until you do a fair amount of listening and taking in whatever information you have. You may have complaint data. You may have information when people exit the company, exit interviews, when customers leave. Doing a debriefing as to why we lost a particular client. So all that information is vital to understand sort of the current state, sometimes the current state of dysfunction, but the current state up front. And then the general rule is to identify some objectives. All right. So normally, I like again to focus on the frontline individuals. How do we make that frontline person the most effective anchor to the relationship, to execute for the customer, and to garner the support needed internally to be effective? And so it starts with that role. And so we create a design team, usually about 6 people or so, of folks that live the job day to day, and maybe we mix in some other people from different functions or some technologists, and we do a working session over a series of weeks to come up with a potential redesign of that front office job. And then once we've done that, we'll try to validate it. And we do so, and we'll discover things like we might have said. It'd be a good idea to have the people in the commercial lending example. Be a good idea to have them go through the credit documentation for a particular loan. So before they start dispersing money or servicing the client regarding it, they really know the credit. Well, that's a good idea, except it takes weeks to go through the loan documentation. And we've got to have these people on the front line. So what initially was intellectually a good idea, we said, no, can't be done in that role. Let's have a support person read the credit documentation, summarize it, and give that summary to the frontline service person. That was a much better solution. So as you sort of go into the job, what are the implications of it? Can it work? Why can't it work? What's the benefit? You will come up with many design changes naturally through that process. So once you have the design in a fairly good state, you're ready to pilot it. You take small units, low risk units, and you do some pilot programs. And you look for the same thing: what's working, what isn't working, and you'll make adjustments in the model through that effort. When you finalize your pilot, or you may do multiple pilots, then it's time for a broader rollout. A lot of communication is necessary to accompany that, and both internal and external. And in all these things, staying close to your staff, the staff that are impacted by the redesign, or the staff who have to support the redesign. They ought to feel part of the journey. So communication, over communication with staff is a big part of what's required. And then you begin that rollout, and you have metrics in place to track really everything surrounding the execution of the work, as well as the outcome. Is it, our customers seeing a difference? Our staff seeing a difference? Are new problems surfacing because of these changes? So you've got to be plugged into all of that, track it, synthesize all that feedback. So you're constantly evolving, constantly refining the model. But you will find very early on, assuming that the technology support is adequate for the early going, and assuming the training is adequate for the early going, you will see improvements in the first couple of weeks that are quite significant. We've seen productivity improvements in the first month of about 26%, for the work of the frontline people, and that just kept growing month after month. We saw our over after the first year, we saw our turnover of operating staff in these impacted areas decline to about 8% a year, where it had been well over 20% in the back office. Um, and we've seen, obviously that we're looking at the impact it has on customers. We've seen customer satisfaction scores in perhaps 6 months hit about 95% and stay there, and that was the highest it had ever been. So you will see outcomes that are impressive, that capture people's attention, and your costs are also going to start coming down. Productivity improvements in the first year, about 20% were realized in terms of, should say, actually cost savings of 20% in the first year. And what's important with these redesigned jobs is that the ability to absorb new work actually improves as well. So you might have fewer people, you're set up differently with well-designed jobs, but you can now generally absorb new work without incremental resources. And that's a big add. That's a big plus to management.
How does this change the role of the manager? Right? I mean, you talked about autonomy, right? And also giving people like the entire job to do. How does this impact managers?
It requires some maturity on the part of managers. It requires the ability to let go and to allow people some room to make mistakes and to grow and to take some responsibility for decisions maybe that used to only be done by management. So I mean, we all have the term empowerment, but this model of job design makes empowerment practical. It equips people to be able to take on more responsibility and feel confident about it. They've been trained in it. They have the tools, the information they need to take it on. There are limits to it, right? So if you give approval authority, for instance, to a frontline person for overdrafts, as an example, on the credit side, maybe it's overdrafts up to a certain dollar amount, or for a certain set of customers. So you still are managing the risk, but you're letting go, and you're allowing the people who probably are in a better position to make the decision on the front line make it, and not be second guessed. And it also frees up manager time. That's another benefit of this, right? So because a lot of the approvals tend to be perfunctory approvals, and when when the right people are doing the approvals, they're real approvals. So, again, lots of benefits around that, around letting go of authority and empowering people to be accountable within their core job. So it's very refreshing. Everybody wins.
Is this really still relevant today? It's a trick question, right? And where is it relevant? Only in financial services, right? Where we have like this frontline customer experience, transactional work, or where do you see this adding value?
Well, I think it is relevant. I think there are a lot of other tools now, much more sophisticated tools than we had in the very beginning. And of course, technology has really changed the game dramatically. But I think as long as you have issues where roles and responsibilities are not clearly defined, there's confusion between units in terms of coordination, cooperation. There's a lack of accountability that's evident in many parts of the company where things are passed on to somebody else and certain things just don't happen properly. If those problems no longer existed, then maybe you wouldn't need to talk about job design anymore. But I feel, in every organization, those conditions still prevail. It's a question: are they how bad are they? It's if the noise level is really loud, if you're losing customers or you're losing staff, at a level that you're not happy with, then take a look at jobs, because often job design is part of the issue that is not being addressed. And if you address it, you involve the right people, and you follow the basic principles, you'll make a positive difference and you'll retain people longer. Your customers will begin to feel you're executing better. Because, by the way, they always notice when you're not executing well, and you're not really hiding anything. And so let's solve it at the core. Put people on the front line in a better position to deliver. Empower them, train them, reward them, and it all works. And managers should be happier about that, because they can focus on more important things about the future of their business and their unit, and let staff execute the work that they know needs to be done.
Wonderful. I think that's the perfect ending for this conversation, Joe. I don't think we should carry on any further, right? I think really spot on. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's been a great pleasure to have known you for all these years, and I'm glad we finally got a chance to talk about your experience implementing work design in a number of companies. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Thomas. My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe, like, share, or comment. Until next time, let's make work matter.